Do you notice that fade out? Working on my DJ skills. Welcome everyone to this, what I am really excited and confident about, being a beautiful space, a beautiful community. Um, my name is Oriana Ides, and I'm joined by Jen Leland, and we'll introduce ourselves in just a second. We have projected on the screen a bit of a mind stretch for you to think about, just an offering as we settle into this space, and love to see what it bubbles up for you as we go through some of the initial slides to orient us to this community of practice. So welcome to self-attuning to our emotional activation, tending to our own wounds while supporting the healing of others. This is a dream space for me, something that we have been working on for quite a bit of time, in hopes of creating space that supports the finding and expanding into our wholeness as those that provide service and support to others. Before we begin with the content of today, we're going to go through a bit of housekeeping, so please bear with us for that. In the spirit of building accessibility and community, there's a few things that we ask. We have found that it creates a deeper sense of safety when cameras are on. So if possible, we really encourage you to have your camera on. There will be opportunity for breakout, and especially in that space when we're in small groups and dialogue, it can feel really vulnerable to speak to a blank camera. So we encourage you to come as you are, and if you have circumstances that don't allow the camera on, that's totally understandable. But we invite you to use the chat then to engage and be present with us. You can click on the closed captioning bar at the bottom of the screen for auto captioning if that's needed. We encourage you to use the reactions, to raise your hand, to speak and come off mic. This is really a space to uplift all of our wisdom and expertise and pose question. We really believe that that makes the space richer, and a better experience for all when you're engaged in that way. And self-care comes first. We believe that deeply. We're at the end of our days, many of us, creeping into evening if you're on the East Coast. And so we really encourage you to take the space and do the things that you need in order to care for yourself as we move through the next hour and a half. And then if you have any technical difficulties, please private chat tech support. Private chat me, and I will support you in navigating any technical difficulties that arise. So this offering today is brought to you on behalf of the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. We are deeply invested in and committed to uplifting the experiences, the voices, the expertise of educators. That's those tending to the wellness of young folks in school spaces, partners, community organizations, families, in creating sustainable change in the ways in which we navigate crisis and work towards this beautiful opportunity of healing and renewal. We do that in a variety of ways. We encourage you to check out our website if you are new to us, and become a part of our community in deeper and varied ways. Just briefly want to share a bit about myself. My name is Oriana Ides, and I had the privilege, the honor of working in schools for about 18 years, providing direct service as a teacher, as a school-based therapist, and as an administrator. And now have the privilege of working with the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project to support educators in a more intimate way and holding space that promotes renewal and recovery through crisis. So I want to introduce Jen and give her a moment to share a bit about herself.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's so good to see the names keep rolling in. Thank you for being here. My name is Jen Leland, she, her pronouns. I've been a therapist licensed for, 20 years now. And have worked in a variety of schools. I've been a school-based therapist. I've done a lot of work in therapeutic preschools, in special education, what they call emotionally disturbed classrooms, and our sometimes very emotionally disturbed school systems. And also working with a variety of ages, and now currently working at Trauma Transformed and the Rise Center in Richmond. So continue to work with, be honored to work with, and be enlivened by the healthy struggle and transformative experiences working with young people. So very honored to be on the call with you all. Many of you are school-based therapists or therapists, and I just want to honor you've been holding so much for school sites and school communities. And so my deepest hope is that you can allow yourselves to drop in to this space and this series and really have it be a place that supports you.
Thank you, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
So in starting to or continuing to create the container for today, we want to provide an opportunity for us to arrive together. We are in the middle of the week, at the end of our days, and want to, as Jen just acknowledged, we're all holding so much and asked to do tremendous work throughout your day. And so we want to provide some opportunity to arrive, to settle, to experience what it is that our whole self is kind of engaging in this moment. And so I'd like to start with land acknowledgement. And these words we invite you to listen to feel into. If you'd like to lower your gaze or close your eyes or whatever helps you really feel into the words, we encourage you to do. And I'll read it. So our journey begins with the acknowledgement that we, as displanted diasporic people, often a result of historical force, reside on unceded sacred indigenous land, past, present, and future. We offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions towards decolonization. We recognize the historical colonialism and ongoing colonialism that has led to the present day circumstances where land acknowledgements are offered in place of land. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology structures and ways of thinking we are using every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of that art we make leave significant carbon footprint, contributing to change in climate that disproportionately affects indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join us and acknowledge all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. We acknowledge that this country would not exist if it were not for the free, enslaved labor of Black people. We honor the legacy of the African diaspora and Black life, knowledge and skills stolen due to violence and white supremacy. While the movement for justice and liberation is building and we are witnessing the power of the people, many are still being met with violence and even killed. I invite you to take a deep breath as we honor the experience of colonization and our presence on this land. And for an opportunity to feel into our bodies and sense some of the information and the wisdom of our bodies, moving from land to our bodies, I want to offer a practice that will take us through some collective movement and some collective breath. And just to give you a bit of a preview, I think it'll take about 2 minutes. I'm going to invite us to move together and breathe together. And you are, I ask you to join in whatever ways feel most comfortable for you. And so if just listening is where you're at today, that is absolutely okay. And if you want to dip in and dip out, that also is totally fine. So I'm going to close my eyes for this, but you don't have to. And the invitation is to start with your feet and just notice your toes. Maybe wiggle your toes and allow that movement in your toes to become a little grander, a little more pronounced, a little more vigorous. I invite you to start stomping if you can. If you're in a place where you can stomp your feet, press into the ground, create some movement with your feet. I invite you to do so. Find your hands. As you're stomping your feet, I invite you to wiggle your fingers. I invite you to shake your hands. I invite you to move your arms. And as I count to 3, we're going to deeply inhale and stop all movement. 1, 2, 3. Suspend your breath. Feel sensation. Exhale. Inhale. Slowly, deeply, suspending your breath at the crown of your head. And exhale. You release any tension you're holding. Unlock your hips or your thighs or your jaw. Drop your shoulder. Rest your hands. Feel into your belly. Loosen the grip of your feet. Breathe at your own pace. We can take a collective deep breath, starting from the bottom of our toes, allowing that breath to rise up our legs, our thighs, our belly, our chest, to the top of our heads. And exhale out of your mouth, audibly if you can. If your eyes are closed, you can open them. Look for any windows or doors in your surrounding. Bring your attention back to your screen, back to our community. After the opportunity to center our attention on land, center our attention in our bodies, feel some activation, feel some settling, invite you to find the chat and share who you are, the role that you play in supporting young people, and any feelings that you're experiencing in this moment or bringing into this space. So, often we honor thought over feeling, and right now we really want to center our physical sensations, our body feelings. the wisdom of our body. Love to see that come in the chat. We're arriving with some anticipation and excitement, with gratitude for this community, some anxiety, some pain. Arriving with the space of feeling frazzled, sensation of frazzled. Thank you for your vulnerability, for your transparency, your honesty. Naming is such an important part of our healing journey. There's some calm. Bring that calm in, welcome it. Thank you. Excitement, the heaviness of holding grief for others. Beautiful. We invite you to take a look at the images of folks here in this space, the words in the chat. Our hope really is that we're building community with one another, and our intention to create brave space to attune to our experiences really is deepened and more possible when we can connect with one another in this way. So I'm doing the best I can to read the chat out loud, but I really do encourage you to read the beautiful work, the powerful words of people sharing in the chat what you're arriving with. As folks continue to read, we just want to orient us to this community of practice. We are all such unique and dynamic beings that arrive to this moment full of story and full of experience. And our story and our experience, our lived experience, absolutely impacts how we show up to do the work that we're doing on a daily basis. And so Jen and I have this beautiful vision of creating space for folks to unpack and explore and make close friend with our experiences so that we are more whole and closer to healing in the service we're providing for others and for ourselves, just for ourselves, right? So often we do this work so we can be better for our work. And I'm trying myself to kind of interrupt that part and just say, like, healing is for me. So our objectives are our hopes in this community of practice, this 4-part series that is going to span over the weeks of March, is really to create this brave and generative space that feels regulating as well. There was much note of feeling frazzled and anxious. And so we're hoping that this can be a space of soothing as well. That we are engaging in community valued, trauma-informed regulation strategies. And so many of us are providing direct one-on-one support as RJ coordinators, as mentors and coaches, as therapists and social workers. And so we're hoping to build our toolbox in that relation as well, so that we can better serve our communities. And then imagine new ways of incorporating recovery and renewal activities into our therapeutic practice. Just to kind of walk you through what today is going to feel like, we're in this space of orienting to our community of practice. In just a second, Jen will walk us through some understanding activation as sacred information. We'll have an opportunity to self-attune to our trauma responses in small groups. and then engage in conversation around what that felt like, and what we are wondering in relation to it. So as I said, this is the first session in a series of 4. Today, we're exploring the polyvagal nervous system and our automatic trauma responses. We will be attuning to and affirming our core selves with some brain spotting techniques next week. In the following week, we'll be using Zaretta Hammond's framework, SOTA, to befriend our activation. And then we will be examining our stories and the complexities of our experience and duality with some transformative practice. So that's a little roadmap for our time together over the course of this month. And lastly, before we engage in the content, I want to offer these ways of building community and creating safety. Um, the uh, hope is that we really are exploring and becoming more intimate with our emotional activation. And so this should feel therapeutic. We want to really also state that this is not therapy and that we are practicing self-care within this space and outside of this space, and that we're thinking about our sharing and our offering and its impact on others and our own wellness. Acknowledging that being here is participating, like showing up is incredibly, such an incredible, powerful effort in regards to your own healing and regulation. A trust that there's always enough time to do the right work. I always feel as though there's not enough time, but want to lean into my trust that there is, um, and really challenge my notions around finished or done, right? This is a long journey. Want to respect one another's complex personhood and really speak with a person first language, think and listen through person first language, practice contextual confidentiality. So, what's shared in our small groups, really, we encourage you to bring the themes of the energy of this space to other parts you're working within, but that the names of people who share, we keep to ourselves. The school sites, the districts, things of that nature, we do not share. And then Adrienne Marie Brown has this beautiful framing that there's a conversation only the people in this room can have. And we believe that deeply at School Crisis Recovery and Renewal. And it really calls us to really contribute, I think. So I'll leave that there and invite you to share anything else you might need in this space from this community as we're building together. Is there anything else you might need to feel settled, to feel present, to feel open to the content we'll be engaging in? We invite you to share that in the chat now. I hand it over to Jen.
Yeah, it's so good to see all the faces. Thank you, Oriana. It's a beautiful opening. So, yeah, so welcome. Welcome. If I can get maybe some emojis, if folks can interact with emojis, if that's available to you. How many of you are familiar with the polyvagal theory or the vagus nervous system? How many of you have gone down the neuroscience trauma rabbit hole? I see some fellow allies and co-conspirators in this. Some emojis coming through. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and how many folks are doing, thank you. How many folks are doing trauma healing, clinical or school-based practices with students. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for that. Can we go back one slide, Oriana? Yeah. So again, I'm going to go through the next four or five, I don't know, or so slides very quickly. I'm doing a bare bones introduction to polyvagal. I feel like understanding our nervous system and befriending our nervous system is a way for us to go in and access our own healing wisdom as we hold healing spaces and transformative experiences for the students and young people we're in service to. So I call that sacred information. It's generational, right? Intergenerational, our nervous systems, it's connected to our DNA, it's connected to our lineage. And I feel like it's connected to also all the allies and spirits and ancestors around us. So today this series is called Attuning to Activation. And today we felt like we needed to start with attuning to ourselves, right? How many times have I been in trouble because I've shown up at a school site and I'm in my sympathetic nervous system, which we'll go over, and I'm not attuned to that, I'm not aware of it, and I'm just creating interventions and actions, and I'm really disconnected from my own attunement. So understanding our polyvagal nervous system, understanding what's happening when we pop open the hood to our bodies, befriending our nervous system can help us not only bring more ease to our own nervous systems as we hold so much throughout the day, but also students know, right? Students know when we are activated. They can feel it. They can feel it even when we're not aware of it. So it's not only an incredibly effective practice for ourselves as clinicians, as people who support young people, but it's effective for students too, because they will sense it, right? Young people will sense it. So we're going to talk about polyvagal theory today and some 3 organizing principles and big props. Most of the slides have been adapted from Deb Dana's work. I don't know if folks are familiar with Deb Dana and Stephen Porges. And so I can send links and share links with folks afterwards for resources after this session for those who want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole of the polyvagal system. And so the understanding today is about getting familiar with the 3 different branches of our autonomic nervous system and the ways in which we might be activated. And we're defining activation as an emotional and or physical response to something we may identify as a threat consciously or subconsciously. Right? We're also going to be spending a little bit of time talking about co-activation and co-regulation. So I like to say the polyvagal theory is rooted in this understanding that we are hardwired, neurologically wired for connection and protection. And sometimes those both go hand in hand, and sometimes they sort of challenge each other, right? And this is a really beautiful graphic that I found the other day for this presentation. It says, not all who wander are lost. I love that because sometimes the vagal nervous system, or the vagus nervous system, is called the wandering nerve of compassion. Right? So it's it goes from the top of our head and our brain stems all the way down through our throat area and vocal cords and down into our digestive tracts and down into our upper GI and lower GI and stomach area. So it's a very long and wandering nerve of many branches, and we're going to become familiar with it. This isn't going to be a deep dive, but I wanted to give us some sort of foundational language. So we're going to be talking about neuroception and the 3 different branches, and then some co-regulation. And the other thing I want to say about polyvagal theory is that the reason why I love it is that it really gives us a way to bring the autonomic nervous system directly into our interactions with ourselves and young people. And it can help if we provide this psychoeducation also to young people, especially older students. It can help them become active operators of their own nervous systems, right? And access that. The other thing I want to say is that sometimes the stories that students tell themselves about who they are and how the world works, or how the school system works, or how the classroom works, begins in the autonomic nervous system, right? The stories begin when information is sent through the pathways and all those lovely little branches from the body to the brain, where it is translated into beliefs. And the brain takes that information, that autonomic information, and creates story to make sense, right? To make meaning, to take something that feels really sometimes chaotic and begin to try to bring cohesion to it. That's our beautiful body's way of meaning making. But what I love about the polyvagal theory is that it prompts us to know that if we want to change the story, right? If we're working with young people who are saying, school's not for me, right? I don't belong here, or I can't get what I need here, or I'm not smart enough, whatever stories or beliefs they're bringing in. If we want to begin to transform or change the story, we need to start by changing the state. And I want to do a caveat, right? So we're going to be talking a lot about the inner workings, but just acknowledging there are also conditions in the school systems that activate us, right? So there are conditions, and there are contexts, and there are many, many different layers of activation. Today, we're going to focus on the things that we can begin to influence inside of us. And so next slide. Next slide is this idea called neuroception. So neuroception, I like to think of it as, today I drove to work. I drove to Rise Youth Center in Richmond. That's where I work on Wednesdays. That's where I am today. I will tell you that a part of me drove without being conscious. I know that's happened to some folks, right? You are driving, you are taking public transportation, you're moving from one space to another, and you can't even remember how you got there. That was your neuroception getting you there. So we can think of neuroception as the subconscious. So it's an attentive state. It's an attuned state beyond awareness, before we bring awareness in or consciousness in. It's a subconscious system, and it often is in the background with us. It's in the background right now, working on our behalf, scanning for potential threats, and also maybe scanning for safety. Who might be safe to connect with? Is it safe to turn on my camera? Where might be the threats in this Zoom room, right? Potential danger. So that's happening beyond our awareness. It's happening for our students, it's happening for our clients. And sometimes our neuroception can be so-called faulty. So this is referring to when there's an inability to inhibit defense in a safe environment and or activate defense in a risky environment. And so the way, if you look at this graphic over here, you'll see maybe a snake, maybe a stick. I will tell you there's both. But when we talk about our neuroception, if we see it, if our neuroception is actively working in the background and interprets one of the sticks as a snake, it's going to have a different way of storing that experience for us, of making meaning of that experience, of activating us to either mobilize us, immobilize us, than if we see a stick. And so when we talk about faulty neuroceptions, that just means folks who maybe see snakes everywhere where there's sticks, right? So they're sort of stuck, not fluid. So it doesn't mean bad or broken. When we think about our states, when we think about our polyvagal, what our optimal state is being really flexible and fluid and being able to both be aware of what's happening and being able to adapt and influence our different states of activation so that we can ultimately influence our stories. And next, okay, I'm also, please, Oriana, give me cues if I'm over time too as well. I count on you, my co-regulator for time. So polyvagal is an updated, I'm a longtime trauma trainer. I was doing trauma trainings, I think 2005 or so. I was training on the autonomic nervous system. And we generally, as trauma trainers, we talked about just two branches, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Polyvagal is an updated map of this. And so we're looking at 3 different branches of our nervous systems, right? We're looking at the sympathetic system, and the sympathetic system I like to think of as the gas, right? This is what mobilizes us. This is what kicks us into high gear. This is why we are probably all on the call today, because at some point, our sympathetic nervous system said, okay, we got to move, right? We got to move. We want to mobilize. The sympathetic system is usually in a state, it can be in a state of hyperarousal, hypervigilance, right? We see a threat, our neuroception says, hey, threat ahead, threat here, increases our heart rate, our blood pressure, blood flows through our muscles, especially our large muscles, which then mobilizes us. Sympathetic system can be both fight and flight, right? We can fight and combat, or we can run like hell. The other state that we're referring to is the parasympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system contains the next 2 branches of the polyvagal system. One is called the ventral vagal nerve. The ventral vagal nerve is sometimes referred to as our social engagement. And this was the most recent branch of our autonomic nervous system to form, right? So mammals have this. So this is an evolution, right? And this is our kind of calm, curious, relaxed, connected, coherent state. This means that in our neuroception that's running in the background, that there may be some danger cues that we sense, right? And also our autonomic nervous system has a bias for danger cues. So even if we have a lot of safety cues on board, sometimes we'll tip into threat mode just because we have a bias towards that. But let's say that we are in this moment, we might have some like danger cues hanging out there, but we also have a lot of safety cues, right? Maybe you're in a protected space right now. Maybe you're not in an environment that's very loud or overstimulating. Maybe you have some privacy, one would hope. Maybe you are off work. Maybe you're ending your day. Maybe it's a slower period. Maybe you had a nice, nourishing lunch and some hydration. You may be in your ventral vagal, right? This is the state that we're in when we are in a regulated state, right? Where we're in our optimal stress zone. We're able to experience full range of emotions. We're able to feel our feelings, be aware of them, right? We don't need to shut them down because we're going to run soon or fight. This is where learning takes place. This is where learning can take place. This is where learning is optimized. This is where therapy is optimized. This is where crisis support is optimized. And I want to say here, ventral vagal is not where we want to live all the time, right? The purpose, again, and I'll keep repeating this, is that we're flexible and we can move through these states with some influence and awareness. We need all of these different states. And then the last state we call dorsal vagal nerve. It's also in the parasympathetic branch. And this is our collapse. This was the first state, the first activation state, right? This is where we freeze or collapse. We're totally immobilized. I was like this 2 weeks ago. I had spent way too much time in sympathetic, trying to do way too many things, was responding to way too many crises, and then finally had my adrenal crash and wanted to just crawl under the covers, talk to nobody, drop all the balls, and just cuddle with my dog and not even eat, right? Netflix and hide. Not even chill, just hide. So that I was in my dorsal vagal nerve, right? I needed to harness energy and just shut it all down. This can be associated with the freeze response. And in both, you'll see in both the sympathetic system and in dorsal, it's really difficult for learning to take place. It's really difficult for us to move out of that state and into a connected, calm, regulated state. And so next slide. Okay, so if I am in my sympathetic, and as I went through that, I hope you were thinking about what your own maps look like for you, because that is part of our work together, just to attune to ourselves, right? Because like I said, young people will know. They know when I'm not attuned or connected with myself, right? And for those with animals or children, they also really know, don't they? It's an energetic resonance that they pick up on. So I want to talk about co-regulation, because we're going to be talking about co-regulation and also co-activation as we talk about attuning to our own nervous systems and attuning to those of others. So many of you know, and you are here because you hold this deep wisdom and truth that we are hardwired for connection, that co-regulation begins before we are even born, right? In the womb, in the waters of the womb. That babies and infants, that we all learn co-regulation before we learn self-regulation, right? That is in fact how we learn self-regulation. And so I want to just go through quickly some ingredients for co-regulation. Safety. I want to talk about safety a little bit. So safety as perceived by neuroception. So we can't will ourselves to feel safe, right? And so I want to hold this out because this is some degree of complexity, right? Safety can't be assumed. It can't even sometimes be assumed by us, right? We have to check in with our neuroception field. So there has to be some degree of our neuroception attending to enough cues of safety, not all, but enough cues of safety that our bodies are not jumping into sympathetic or dorsal, right? That there's enough vagal energy there. And it doesn't mean that there might not be some parasympathetic, sympathetic energies there, but that there's enough vagal there. There's enough regulation. There's enough perceived safety in our nervous system that we can exhale, that we can connect. There must be some resonance. So this could be a whole another day-long training, and I encourage you all to check out Deb Dana's work, but there needs to be some resonance, right? Some resonance that we feel when we're connecting to somebody else, and then some mirroring. So right now, if we were in front of each other and your voice was calm and the tone of your voice was inviting and welcoming, if you were mirroring me a little bit, if you smiled, those are all cues of safety for me that I can then connect with you. And that in and of itself is co-regulation, right? And also, we can be impacted by co-activation. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has, right? So I'll give a quick example. I was, working in special education classrooms, and we had the walkie-talkies, and somebody at the walkie-talkies said, "Jen, can you go shadow so-and-so? He's in the school hallway tearing down all the other students' art posters off the walls and tearing them up." Okay, so here I go. I walk outside the classroom. I see the student. I'm keeping close, but not too close. I'm letting him know that I'm here. I'm letting him know that I'm here, that I'm behind him, that I'm just walking with him right now. I'm not saying too many words. And then all of a sudden, I see another student coming down the hallway who sees him tearing off the posters and starts yelling, right? So now I have more cues for danger, right? Oh no, now I've got two students. I don't want them to get into it, right? How am I going to do this? The other student is also activated, right? Seeing that student in his sympathetic, wired for fight, tearing stuff apart mode. So now we've got three people who are co-activating rather than co-regulating. So I use that as an example. We can come back to, I'm sure all of you have your own examples of this, right? Now I turn the corner. I've got two students. I'm on my own as the adult. I turn the corner. I'm still providing proximity, and I see my other colleague come around the corner, make eye contact with me, say that they're going to help out. Now I have cues for safety, right, from another person. So now I'm starting to get a little ventral back, right? A little less on edge. And again, we're back into co-regulation. So co-activation, co-regulation. Co-regulation, we're sort of finding our way together back into vagal, ventral vagal. And co-activation, we are sending each other consciously or unconsciously into fight or flight or freeze. And I think that's my time, Oriana? I'm gonna turn it back over to you, and we'll come back to these sort of three organizing principles of polyvagal in a second.
Has to happen once a day. Speaking on mute. Thank you, Jen, for guiding us through that. I know many of us are familiar with this information, but I think continuing to engage with it and explore it, especially as it relates to our own experience, our own physical experience, provides so much healing and learning. For me, I was in conversation in my grad programs and even at my school sites around trauma responses, but didn't quite have the experience to explore my own trauma response. And just want to share that in the opportunity to explore my own trauma response, I have been able to really understand my relationship to boundaries, my internal self-talk, the things that soothe and support me in regulating and finding wellness. And so much of what this is about is how we might be able to bear witness, befriend our experience, our whole experience with compassion, with non-judgment, how we might sit down with it and listen to it, and listen into the information that it has to offer. And at SCRR, and so many of us, believe deeply that the pandemic has been an opportunity to stop, business as usual, and to engage in education and realms of education differently in more holistic and humanizing ways. And so being able to offer compassion to our full experience is critical in that work. And we wanted to spend some time kind of exploring what happens when we're not attending to the activation, when we're not attending to our parasympathetic nervous system, what that might look like within our bodies and within our school sites. Um, Often hypo or hyperarousal can limit flexibility and intentionality when we're operating from a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. It is hard to see the myriad of potential in front of us in like one decision or in the culture and community that we're creating in our school sites. Um, it compromises our problem solving and distracts us from the present moment, right? We're thinking about the future or the past often when our parasympathetic nervous system is in its fight, flight, freeze or fawn response. Um, and it really can get in the way of our ability to experience joy and beauty and deep, meaningful connection. And we know so clearly that that's where the healing is. Um, and it also distorts our sense of self-efficacy. And we have, you know, looking at studies and from our own experience around how teachers stay in this work long term, it is really feeling like what you're doing is effective and it's not breaking you, it's not fragmenting you, and that you're able to meet the demands of your work. And when we're not able to meet those demands, burnout is just, right around the corner. And so really being able to understand our experience in the work and our activation is critical. We are not working in a society or in systems that honor listening to our experience or honor the intimacy that healing and befriending our activation requires. And we love this chart that we've adapted a bit by Gabor Mate, who from When the Body Says No, when we're not listening to our activation or our conditioned responses, when we're on that autopilot that Jen mentioned, right? And reacting from our early childhood experiences or the ways in which society has socialized us to perceive fear or danger, then it really shows up in our bodies, right? Our bodies are the first indicators often of danger, of illness and disease. And so just want to kind of elevate this, that it is very likely for us, if we don't pay special attention and offer compassion to our experience, that we feel a deepened sense of tiredness and heaviness. I saw in the chat so much reference to the exhaustion we're feeling, right? That we could focus on past loss or regret or guilt or shame. The physical sensations of racing heart, the inability to sleep, right? We know that when we are in this activation state, that all other parts of our body begin to shut down. We stop digesting, right? There's no need to for sleep, or we sleep too much. And so just want to kind of illustrate or elevate these tendencies, that they can show up in our emotional landscape as disassociation, anxiety, and anger, and that they often really do also impact our relationships. I know from my own experience that I've really struggled with codependency, with feeling as though my work was saving lives, or that the young folks I was working with, their lives depended on me showing up. And that made me often show up in moments where I needed to rest or pause or take a seat and chill or hide. And so um, we want to invite you to think about how your activation feels for you, how you might know in your body when you feel activated, or how you might know in your emotional landscape you're experiencing some activation. How might you know in your relationships that you're experiencing activation? Sherry, I love that. Hands up. Come on. Yeah.
My head starts pounding. That's the first sign. Um, and that's the biggest sign. When my head starts pounding, I know I need to my initial reaction is to try to get away. Usually I can't, but I know I need to, if I can't get away, I need to maybe take a deep breath or something, but usually it's a headache that comes first.
Mhm.
And if I can't get away, I'm gonna yell or do something. And I'm a teacher, so I can't do that. So I gotta regulate fast.
And I bet, I mean, you're incredibly attuned and aware, but I bet even before that loud knocking on your head, that there are other sensations you're moving too fast to even um, be aware of.
Well, with kids, I just have to, I have to take a deep breath and tell them to take a deep breath, because I work with kindergartners and they get frustrated easily.
Mhm.
So when they get dysregulated, it makes me dysregulated. So I'm often say, take a deep breath. It's not worth getting upset over. And some kids will say, I can't do it. Okay, fine. You don't have to do it right now.
Mhm.
Right. Take a deep breath.
Mhm.
And it's amazing because a lot of kids, especially with the pandemic and this whole learning loss, many teachers make them think they have to do the work right now. I'm like, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything you don't want to right now. Take a
Mhm.
breath.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. You don't have to do anything right now, but take a breath, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. The expectation that we catch up is like so um heavy on folks as educators and as our young people, right? And we lose our humanity and our wholeness in that process or in that need to catch up.
Mhm.
Anyone else feel like open to sharing either unmute or in the chat, like how you know you're feeling activated, what it might feel like or sound like, what it might look like in your relationships? Ashley.
Hi, sorry, my camera is off. I have COVID. Uh,
Thank you for being here.
yeah, of course. So I noticed in my body it starts to feel like electricity is going through it, and my heart starts to beat a little bit faster, and then I start to have a lot of like flashing like negative thoughts, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting activated. I need to take some deep breaths. I need to like separate myself from maybe be from a student, maybe it might be from the adults in the room, but that's how I can tell I'm being activated.
Mm.
Beautiful. Yeah, I see that mirrored in the chat as well. It's like ruminating or um fast thoughts, a million thoughts, racing thoughts. Farima.
I've been doing a lot of like inner child and inner adolescent healing work. So because I've been like going back to those different iterations of myself, I can tell when like little me is like really scared and wants to hide and engages in behaviors that I used to engage in as a young child, versus like when my teenage self is super activated and wants to like fight and go off and like be petty. And there's just certain behaviors that take me back to those older versions of myself that help me to be a little bit more aware of like who's showing up in the moment. Like, is that me? Is that younger me? Like, which younger version of me? And that's been really helpful for me to like see myself a little bit more clearer and deeper.
Yeah.
Thank you. What has supported your awareness in like distinguishing what stage of yourself is like the loudest or presenting a need?
I'm in a 12 steps program. It's called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And I think the repeated exposure to like meditations, like visualizations of different moments of my life helped me to be more aware of those like different sensations and moments and yeah, just stories, like stories that kind of represent themselves in the current.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that I want to say a couple of things. I just love that you are connected with two parts. One that's like a little dorsal energy, like the little child, and one that is you're a teenager, you're rebellious, maybe teenager sympathetic system. And I just want to reiterate, like, we need all of these parts of ourselves. We don't need them to be running the show, the dorsal or the teenager, right? The child that wants to hide. Like, we have to have one foot, one foot in the practical, one foot in the sacred, as my mentor says. But we have to be in the practical. So when we're at school, we need our dorsal energy, because that's what says, hey, whoa, 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 back up. You need to rest. You can't take on that extra assignment. You need to go regather up energy. And we also need our teenagers and our sympathetic mobilizing to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a boundary here. Fight or flight, there's a boundary we need to set. So maybe we don't need them running the show, although sometimes they need to, but maybe in general, we don't need them running the show, but befriending all of our parts and leading them. We think of ventral, like an optimal state is like ventral vagal is a big umbrella, but it doesn't mean there's no sympathetic or dorsal energy. And I just want to say a lot of folks tend to go to sympathetic nervous system, like head pounding, right? Wanting to yell, wanting to go away, run away. And I love that the folks who mentioned that talked about grounding exercise. So how to take that activation and ground it. And then I'm curious about those with dorsal activations. There's anyone in the chat who goes into dorsal, like collapse, foggy, numb, disappearing. I know when I'm in dorsal is when I go to do my Netflix and hide, and I'll watch a whole show and can't even remember what happened. I can't even take it in, right? I'm totally disconnected, disassociated. I'm shut down. I'm watching it, but I have no idea what I just watched. And so sometimes thinking about how do we influence, how do we take care of ourselves when we're in dorsal state is, more activating, like Oriana did in the beginning, like stomping our feet, embodiment, coming into activation a little bit. Dorsal for me is scrolling for hours. Yep. Yeah. Going through the motions without awareness can be dorsal. Total disconnection. Yeah, disappearing, not feeling, not being. So again, we don't want to, the top of the ladder doesn't mean we've arrived and now we're just going to kick it here at the top. Understanding this is about being flexible, right? Understanding when we're in dorsal, understanding when we're in sympathetic, and bringing some fluidity. First of all, bringing some love to our body for helping us survive and get through, and then bringing some love to help us be more fluid and adaptive. And so I just want to say, if you want to go deeper into this, I love we're beginning to get a sense of the terrains of your autonomic nervous systems, and we want you to attune to your own and befriend it. And so there's 3 ways to do this. One is to complete your own map. There's a link there, and I can try to put it into the chat as well. That's Deb Dana's work. It has a slideshow and some maps. You can do acoustic mapping. I do this with young people that I'm a clinician with. We make our ventral playlist. What are the Spotify tracks that can kind of get you activated or grounded, right? Or feeling again, connected, regulated. And then just beginning to think about triggers and glimmers. So triggers are what triggers us to get into our sympathetic and dorsal states. And what are the glimmers that help us get more ventral vagal energy? And somebody's Cherry says the trauma resiliency model is a great framework on grounding that has been very helpful. Yep. Yeah, so lots of grounding. And somebody said dorsal is dangerous. Dorsal can be dangerous, but these are all survival. You know, these are survival strategies, right? I think sometimes dorsal can be dangerous if we meet every cue with our dorsal activation, right? When we get stuck. But yes, dorsal can be the way we check out and we say, I'm just gonna, you know, disappear into substance use or misuse. Sympathetic can be dangerous too, but again, this is about just really attuning and befriending our states. They're trying to do their best job to protect us. So bringing them love, bringing them attention, bringing them awareness, and then seeing if we can begin to adapt, either through self-regulation or even better, co-regulation.